p.m. today. That is because, of course, we do have more FA Cup action. We have a match at 8 o'clock, so it's going to be a quick one, maybe half an hour, 45 minutes. I know, every time I say it's going to be a quick one, it is not in fact a quick one. It's a lie I tell both myself and yourself. But look, we're going to do our very best. You probably have gathered from the thumbnail, we are going to be speaking about the very lovely Eddie Howe. Now, obviously, Ash is on the channel quite regularly. We've had Mama Flossie on the channel and she's often in the chat. We talk about Newcastle pretty regularly on this channel. But there's a lot of people that have suddenly decided they want to be on our bandwagon. They want to talk about Eddie Howe. And I decided, well, if everybody else is jumping on the bandwagon, you know what that means? We're going to have to do ourselves a deep dive. Everybody seemed to really enjoy the video we did on Jack Grealish. We took one person, we focused on him, we looked at what was going on and how he was impacting the team around him, or not impacting, as the case may be sometimes. So I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to do that with our Eddie Howe? Now, I have got a poll in the chat, and it is, has Howe taken Newcastle as far as he can? Option A is seems like it, which so far has 57%, and option, I don't know if I said A or 1, option B, no injuries. I wrote this poll, just so everybody knows. It's not only behind the dugouts chats that I can't read my own sentences. So, option B is no injuries have scuppered him. For those not familiar with slang, I'm sure that's a word over there in England as well, but scuppered is like, you know, they've undone him. They've done him like a kipper. But of course, the very lovely Dave Boy is in the chat with us. Our guest is here, and my live-in tech support is in the chat as well, which is wonderful. So please do smash a like on the video on your way in. I see Dave Boy is back. He has secured a taxi to the pub, and he is back with us. And of course, lovely iNotes is in the house. Thank you so much for joining, guys. Please do smash a like. Please do get your votes in on the poll, and I will get us started talking about Eddie Howe. Now, obviously everybody is familiar with him, but I'll be honest, as much as I know Eddie Howe, I know who he is, I know where he works, I know what he looks like, I know what he does, I have an idea of his temperament, I've watched some of his press conferences. I didn't really know in detail kind of his whole career, because I find, certainly until maybe more recently when I've become more involved in content, I know about other teams but not in any great depth. Do you know what I mean? I know in depth about Manchester United. That's my team. I know the players, I know the managers, I know everything behind the scenes. Well, nobody knows everything behind the scenes, but you know what I mean? I know everything that's out there publicly to be known. I don't know any of the other teams in that much depth. So I did a little bit of a look into Eddie Howe, and I am going to share with you the things that I have found. Some of it will be new, some of it won't be new, but we'll go through the whole lot together so we're all working off the same information. Now, obviously when you want to find out things about people, the first place you go is Wikipedia. Clearly, because it is the font of all knowledge, as we all know. If some randomer types it on the internet, it must be true. But what have they got to say to us about our Eddie? Now look, he actually looks like he's at a wedding or something there. You know, he's got a nice shirt on, he's got the trees in the background, he's looking very young. So I'm sure I'd say he put that picture up there himself, if I'm honest with you. But we're looking at his managerial career, and Mama Flossie is just in time. She could probably tell me more about Eddie Howe than Wikipedia ever could. But she's here with her spanner, which means Dave Boy now has to behave. You had a whole minute, Dave Boy. But obviously he was a player for quite some time with Bournemouth, and he then became a manager at Bournemouth. So he entered management, he retired from being a player in 2007. He entered management the following year, taking charge of a Bournemouth side facing relegation to the conference National, now known as the National League, in January 2009, as the youngest manager in the Football League. Under his guidance, Bournemouth were able to avoid relegation during his first season in charge, having started the season on minus 17 points and were promoted to League One the following campaign. After a brief spell as manager at Burnley, Howe returned to Bournemouth and led them to 2 further promotions in 3 seasons, taking them to the top division of English football. He was subsequently named Football League Manager of the Decade in 2015, following 3 promotions in a 7-year period, which is sensational. That is sensational. And I tell you what, Eddie Howe didn't have the Wrexham money at Bournemouth, 100% for sure. He didn't have the Newcastle money at Bournemouth either. But so he was named Football League Manager of the Decade following 3 promotions in a 7-year period with the team that at the time he took over were battling relegation. Absolute, like, a madness. Bournemouth survived in the Premier League for the next 5 seasons under Howe before suffering relegation to the Championship in 2020. He resigned as manager of Bournemouth after the club's relegation. At the time of his departure, Howe was the longest serving manager in the Premier League. So at that time, he was with Bournemouth initially for 3 years. He was then with Burnley for a season, and then back to Bournemouth for another 8 years. So he did total 11 years with Bournemouth. 8 of them were consecutive. And iNotes is asking, isn't Eddie Howe the longest serving manager in the league? It's him or Pep. Well, Arteta is there 7 years, isn't he? So Pep has to be longer than that. So I would say then it has to be Pep. So longest serving manager in the Premier League. I reckon it has to be Pep. Longest current. It's giving me Sir Alex Ferguson, as if I don't know that. I mean, right now, silly Billy. Pep Guardiola is the longest serving current manager in the Premier League, having been in charge of Manchester City since July of 2016. So he's there 10 years. He was appointed on July the 1st. So he'd be 10 years on July the 1st. So, and then I believe Arteta is 7 years. Howe is only with Newcastle since 2021. So he's only 5 years at Newcastle. But at the time, when he was leaving Bournemouth after 8 years, at that point, he was the longest serving manager in the Premier League. And to be fair, iNotes, it's a good point, and it's something that we touch on often on this channel. You don't really have those kind of managers anymore. The managers that stay with the team for the long term. You don't have the Sir Alex Fergusons. You don't have the Arsene Wengers. Pep is an anomaly. There's Pep with 10 years, Arteta with 7, Eddie Howe with 5. The rest you'd be struggling for more than 2 seasons. So it's quite 10 years is high. 7's a bit of a drop. 5 is half. He's only done half of what Pep's done. And after that, it's paltry because they're getting sacked by the month. They're getting sacked every few months, let alone every few seasons at this point in time. So to have spent 11 years with Bournemouth, 8 of those consecutive, is absolutely enormous. To also have the success that he had during that time is incredible. And you can see why Newcastle wanted him. You can see why Newcastle would think he's the guy for us. He took a team that was in real trouble, a team that was looking at relegation, and he took them on 3 successive promotions. That is insanity. That is absolutely unbelievable. And you just can't sniff at it. You really can't. I mean, it's hard to put into words how good that actually is. Now, when he did come to Newcastle United, he took over quite a difficult situation at Newcastle. So similarly to when he went to Bournemouth as a manager, he took over them struggling, languishing towards relegation. When he took over at Newcastle in 2021, they were fighting relegation. They were in 19th at that time when he took over. And by the end of the season, he actually had got them from 19th up into 11th, which is obviously massive. So he did a repeat of what he had done already. He did what he knew how to do. And while I was looking into this, while I was doing the research on this, while I was looking at his career to date, I'm looking at him taking over teams that are in relegation battles and helping them resurge essentially. And the team that kept coming into my head was Spurs. Now, I don't think you move from Newcastle to Spurs. I think it's a sideways step at best, if not at this point a downward step. So I don't think you move from Newcastle to Spurs if he was to move away from Newcastle. But if you're Spurs, I mean, bloody hell, talk about the exact right, perfect person. And I've heard like lots of people talking, and it's not a Spurs show, but I've heard lots of people talking, you know, they would want somebody who is related to Spurs, who knows the club, who knows the team, who knows how things work there, who understands how things run. However, what they also need somebody who is a specialist in relegation, somebody who is a specialist in succeeding against the odds, somebody who can come into a crisis and not panic and pick the players up and know what to do with them. And to be fair, that's obviously what they thought they were getting with Tudor, but Newcastle did it far more successfully than what Spurs are doing when they took in Eddie Howe. So like that, he took them from 19th to the 11th in his first season, and in his first full season, so his second season in charge, but his first full season, he got them Champions League qualification for the first time in 20 years. They hadn't qualified for the Champions League since 2002-2003 season, and it was only their fourth time ever qualifying for the Champions League. So what he had done, even to that point, to save them from relegation and to then get them not only out of relegation but into the Champions League, is just unbelievable. Like, it's so hard. You couldn't possibly overstate that achievement. You could only possibly understate that. Now, we're going to take a brief pause because we have a breaking news announcement in the chat. So we are going to come back to Eddie Howe, but we're going to pause on him being sensational, and we are going to go to Mama Flossie's comment, who is keeping us up to date. Not only does she know how to use her spanner, not only is she great at sharing links, she is phenomenal at keeping us up to date on things that I am not paying attention to. So thank you very much, Mama Flossie. And she has let us know the FA Cup draw is done. Southampton versus Arsenal, Liverpool versus Man City, Chelsea versus Port Vale, and whoever wins this evening, West Ham or Brentford versus Leeds. That is a really interesting draw. I mean, I see I notes straight away in there. Yes, I call it Chelsea versus Port Vale. Obviously, Chelsea getting the best draw there by a country mile. So that's quite good for Chelsea. I think tonight's going to be a really good game. If I had to call it, I'm going to watch it after the stream. If I had to call it, I'm guessing, and it is a guess because it could go either way, I'm guessing Brentford will beat West Ham. Brentford Leeds will be a fantastic game. That'll be really, really good. You would expect Chelsea to beat Port Vale, but I mean, you never know. You really never know. Liverpool versus Man City, that'll be a good one. What it does mean is it makes it slightly easier for the likes of Arsenal and Chelsea. So you would expect Arsenal to beat Southampton. You would expect Chelsea to beat Port Vale. But I would suggest both Arsenal and Chelsea will be delighted with the fact that Liverpool and City, one of them is going to take the other one out. So one of the big teams is going to be already knocked out. So I'm sure they're happy with that. If you're Chelsea or Arsenal, you're over the bloody moon. Brentford or Leeds, you definitely, or West Ham, you can't write any of them off, especially the way the Premier League is this season. Do you know, all of the teams are so strong. We're seeing it in the cup competitions. We had 2 upsets yesterday out of 3. So you really don't know. But I love it. Love it. Excellent. And thank you very, very, very much for letting us know, Mama Flossie, because I did not have my finger on the pulse. I was doing my research. This is what happens. I actually prepped for this stream. I did a little bit of actual background work and research and stuff. And because of that, I had no idea the draw was happening. So thank you very much. Let me see. Matthew is saying Howe has taken them as far as he can, which does bring us nicely back to Eddie Howe. So thank you very much for that, Matthew. So, Eddie Howe did a sensational job at Bournemouth and then came into Newcastle and did a sensational job at Newcastle. Now, after the Champions League qualification, they did struggle. So, the season that they were first in the Champions League, in 22-23, I think it would have been, 23-24, one of them seasons. But they went out in the group stages, which is obviously not what you want to happen after all the excitement of getting in the first place. To go out in the group stages is disappointing. Now, the thing is, it's the Champions League. There's a lot of really good teams in there. They had gone from almost relegation to the Champions League within 2 seasons, which is quite a jump in quality, to be fair. So it's not that it's they did woeful, it was the worst thing ever. It was understandable if you look at the facts. However, obviously it's disappointing because you have that trajectory of, 19th to 11th to, I think it was 4th, and then into the Champions League, and then to come out of the Champions League in the group stages. So it's a real mixture, a bit of a roller coaster, but obviously there's a lot of credit in the bank at that point. Then, last season, he only went and won the Carabao Cup, beat the eventual Premier League winners in Liverpool to win the Carabao Cup, so they certainly didn't have it easy. Like, Liverpool last season was very, very different than Liverpool this season, so that's a feat in and of itself. But in winning the Carabao Cup, he won them their first domestic cup in 70 years. That is more than 2 of my lifetimes stuck together. That is a very, very long time. So I think for me, because obviously I speak to Flossie and I speak to Ash and I speak to, Newcastle fans quite regularly. And I suppose as a United fan, and coming from a fan base that has no patience with our managers, that doesn't give them any credit in the bank, puts it all in the bin, and from my own personal perspective, as a person who genuinely just isn't a patient person, I have been perplexed, I think is the right word, about the amount of patience that a lot of Newcastle fans have had with Eddie Howe. However, when you look at his career achievements, and then the achievements that he brought to Newcastle, many firsts that hadn't happened in a long, long, long time in terms of qualifying for the Champions League, in terms of winning silverware, you can see why the fans love Eddie Howe. You can see why the fans want Eddie Howe to succeed. You can see why the fans would say, I don't want to get rid of him. He's done so much for us. We love him. And if we can succeed with him, it would be preferable to do that than to succeed with somebody else. The problem, I think, becomes when the options aren't succeed with Eddie Howe or succeed with somebody else. I think probably the dilemma comes when it's succeed with Eddie Howe, fail with Eddie Howe or succeed with somebody else. It's very difficult when somebody gives you those memories, like those real proper memories. It's really difficult to then turn around and say, thanks, see you later. It's not like us at United. They come in and they're there half a season and we're sick of them already. Eddie Howe clearly has proven that he's a long-term manager. He's a long-term project. He's loyal to the club. He sticks with a team for a long time. Like that, he spent 11 years with Bournemouth. He's now on he's 5 years into his time at Newcastle. He would obviously want to stay. And you become emotionally attached to them. Like, they become like your friend, not obviously because you don't know them, but I mean, you've gone through those times and those memories and those highs and those lows together. So it's not the same. The Newcastle fan base isn't the same as like a United fan base, the same as like maybe a Chelsea fan base, where we're quite reactionary. they're not. Do you know what I mean? They're quite patient, they're quite calm, and, you know, they have a lot of respect for Eddie Howe. I think another side of it is, and we do often talk on this channel about personality, about the likability factor, about the aura, about the vibes that you give out. Eddie Howe just comes across like the loveliest man. He looks like a chap you would go for a cup of tea, a nice sweet cake, you'd have a chat, you'd talk about the kids. Do you know what I mean? He seems just like a really likeable, nice person. So he's a lovely person. He's given you memories of a lifetime for some people. He's like, for a lot of people actually, he's brought success, and there are mitigating factors this season. So I have to say, having looked at it, and I'm going to go through some of those factors, I'm now starting to understand the patience that a lot of the fans have had and continue to have with Eddie Howe, because there are some saying no, he's got to the end, but there are some saying no, these mitigating factors make it unfair to judge him based on this season alone. And so Flossie is saying he has been our most successful manager, and that's really hard to let go of. It's really hard. And the thing is as well, there's so many teams looking for managers at the minute, and the market for managers doesn't seem to be great. Now, I think after the World Cup, when the World Cup's over, I think there's going to be a heap of them. They're going to be all over the place. But you don't want to be waiting that long to plan. Sure, can you plan a transfer window if you're not getting your manager till after the World Cup? So the other side of it is, if you're going to let somebody like Eddie Howe go, you're going to want to bring in somebody who is categorically better. Because if they're not, what is the point? It's one thing getting rid of like an Amorim or a Carrick or an experimental manager to get in a new manager. It's entirely another matter to get rid of your manager of 5 years who has brought you great success on a maybe. You would want to know whoever you bring in is absolutely 100% categorically better. And I think there are very few managers that are readily available at the moment that are 100% better than Eddie Howe, that have achieved more than Eddie Howe, that have, gone through the mire more than Eddie Howe. So I do think it would have to be a really well thought out decision. They can't do that on a knee jerk. Absolutely not. It would be insane. Lovely Jenny is in the house. Thank you for being here. It is lovely to see you. Let me see. What else are we saying? Dave Boy says, if Eddie left, it should be for one of the cartel clubs except Spurs. I don't think he should go to Spurs, but I think he is exactly what Spurs need. Oh my goodness me. If you could dream up a manager for Spurs, if you're a Spurs fan, Eddie Howe is it. He is exactly who you would be dreaming up. But, as I said, while they're not absolutely blitzing it this season, they're having a really difficult season, which is obviously why we're talking about Eddie Howe at all. He has been receiving some criticism. There have been a lot of question marks around him, primarily from rivals, but I have noticed in the last kind of number of weeks, maybe 2 to 3 weeks, I've started to see more Newcastle fans starting to question him, which is why I've decided now is a good time to do that video, because really rivals can say what they want, because like that we don't always have a full understanding of the whole picture unless we go out of our way to look into it. It's when internal fans start to say things that I kind of go, okay, I want to know more about this because I'm nosy like that. Lovely Shem is in the house. Good day to you, sir. It is lovely to see you. But some of the mitigating factors around this season. So Newcastle have played the most of any club in Europe's big leagues this season, not just in the Premier League. So Newcastle United have been labelled the workhorses of Europe by the New York Times. No team in Europe's 5 biggest leagues, England, Spain, Germany, Italy, France, have played more matches this season than Newcastle. Now, obviously, when you're playing lots and lots and lots and lots of matches, you're tired, you're physically exhausted, you're a human, your body can only do so many things. If you take all of these minutes being played, all of these matches and all of these different competitions, all of the playoff games they're having to do, because that was another criticism. While they have now got back into the Champions League, they were the only English team. So there was 6 English teams in the Champions League. 5 of them got straight through. However, Newcastle ended up having to do a playoff. Obviously, they come out the better for it, but it was extra games that none of the other teams had to play. So all of these minutes impact you. They make you tired. They impact your body. You're going to get more strains. The more you play, the more chance you have of injury. And we know that's something that has impacted Newcastle this season. However, what we also need to add into that is the fact that they have one of the highest average ages of a squad in the Premier League. So if we go to Newcastle, Newcastle's average age in their squad this season is 28 years old. That is really old in terms of football, average age for a team. When we think of how much younger players are breaking through these days, that is quite old for an average age. So a lot of, years ago, when I first started watching football, players broke through much later. They were kind of in their early 20s before they were even starting to make kind of any impact or to even get any minutes in a first team. But now we see players 16, 17, 18, they're playing with the first team squads of these major teams. By the time you're 28, bloody hell, you could have retired twice as a footballer these days. So for their average squad age to be 28, that is old. Now it's younger than I am, but it's old in football language. So this places them among the older squads in the Premier League, with the average starting 11 age reaching between 28 and 29. Okay, so they've played more minutes than any other team in the top 5 European leagues, and they have one of the oldest squads to do this. Okay, so what that tells us is whatever injuries you're normally going to get in any season, add all the extra injuries for all the extra minutes they're playing, and then you have to factor in age, because us oldies, we don't recover as much or as fast as the young whippersnappers, although Dan Burn put that to the test with his punctured lung. But what that tells us is they are going to face challenges in terms of their squad. And they have faced challenges in terms of their squad because, look at what we've just talked about. So, I'm going to show you, I found my own graphs today. I know, I'm so proud of myself, but I found my own graphs. I'm going to show them to you. I'm going to pop them up on the screen. I'm going to zoom in because we're going to look at them separately. So you'll be able to see this first one, okay? So this is days lost from injuries in the Premier League 25-26 season, okay? So this is correct as of March the 9th, 2026. It's on the official Sky Sports website and their source is Opta. So for those of you that love a source and like to know where this information is coming from, it is factually checked. It is fact and checked. Tick the box. So while you're having a quick look at that before I go through it, I'm going to have a little look at your comments, see what you guys are saying. Because I've gone and actually done a bit of research, I'm so pleased with myself. I'm just reading my way through all my research, and then I have to remember, I have a chat, have to interact. The point of this is we talk to each other, not just I ramble. So, note to Lou, talk to the people. Because you're all lovely and I love talking to you. Let me see. Dave Boy says the team he has built is really good, but not maybe the squad because of FFP. Flossie says, exactly, Dave, it has killed our growth, referring obviously to FFP. Roddy's in the house. It is lovely to see you, Roddy. I am glad you're here. You are watching from the start. Good stuff. And Roddy is reminding us all to hit that like button. Good man, Roddy, because I forget to remind people. Dave Boy's having a good eye laugh at me. He says, the New York Times, I read the Star. Do you know what it is, Dave? I read it. Wherever the information is, that's what I'll read. I don't mind. Let me see. What are we saying? Dave Boy is confident for Newcastle. That's what you want to hear. That's what you want to hear. iNote says the last time Rashford had a good... What was the last time? What was the last time? I've obviously jumped in. Okay, so iNote is saying Newcastle at home is scary. I've missed a part of that Rashford bit, so I've come in halfway through. Dave Boy was worried because Spurs was top of the league. Well, they're certainly top of this league for days lost from injuries, so we will go through that in a minute. Strasbourg Steve, thank you for joining us. Lovely to have you in the house. Howe has definitely taken us as far as he can. 100% change needed for next season. Thankful for what he has done, however, which has been instrumental in turning around the club's fortunes. And that's fair too. So while I do think this is something that it's not... I don't think it's unanimous. I think some fans would very much keep him. I think some fans would let him go like Strasbourg Steve there. I think there's some fans that are probably a little bit caught in the middle because of the emotion of it. However, you can be very grateful to someone for something they've done for you and still say, thank you very much. This is the end of that chapter. So it's definitely a mixed bag at the moment, and it seems to be changing a lot. Jenny is saying, I knew we had injury issues, but interesting to see we are high on the list. And you're right, because Liverpool is actually fourth on this list. They have lost 1,096 days through injuries this season, which I wouldn't in my head, if you ask me which teams have had a lot of injuries this season. If I thought of Chelsea, I would say suspensions. I know obviously because of Ash and Flossie, Newcastle have had a lot. I knew Arsenal had had a fair few, although they've actually slipped down to mid-table in this one. So they've obviously, the last recent while, not had as many injuries. But I wouldn't have thought of Liverpool. Liverpool wouldn't have been one of the teams that sprang to my mind. So you're right, it is actually really interesting to see that, because obviously there's a lot of talk at Liverpool about Slot, about the team, about Salah, about who's underperforming, about, you know, all of the different things that are happening at Liverpool. I haven't actually seen any real in-depth talks about injury problems at Liverpool. And to think you've lost the fourth most days in the Premier League this season through injury, that's actually really, really interesting. You should tell Hassam that and tell him that you found the stat. It's on the Sky Sports website. You go tell him and take the credit, Jenny, because he'll be well chuffed with himself. But what else are we saying? Shem, poor Shem, our lovely Spurs fan, is saying at least we're top of something. Do you know what, Shem? I absolutely love that you see the funny side of everything. It really makes me smile. But let's have a look, because we're all talking about it. So, far and away, a mile away at the top of this list, Spurs have lost 1,555 days through injury this season. 25-26. We're not even at the end of the season. We have months left of the season. That is incredible. When you think they have also had both Romero suspended twice and now Van de Ven is out suspended. And they probably have others that I don't know about. That is incredible. It's huge. Then we have Crystal Palace. So not only are they selling their best players and their manager is doing a madness in every press conference, but they have lost 1,249 days through injury, which is unbelievable. Chelsea, like I said, I would have thought of a lot of red card suspensions, but they've lost 1,113 days through injury. And I have to say, I do find it very interesting. So two teams there in Spurs and Chelsea that have lost quite a number of days through suspension, through, I suppose a lack of discipline by getting cards and therefore suspensions, have also lost an enormous amount of days through injury. And it does make you wonder, are the cards due to a lack of discipline Probably in part. But are the cards also due to tired players who are having to overplay due to a lot of injuries, making bad decisions? So is it maybe not all down to like a lack of discipline, and is it partly down to tiredness? These players, as I said, we're all only human. We've all got a limit to what we can do and achieve. Is it possible that maybe the tiredness, you don't make good decisions when you're tired. You don't know what you're doing. I don't know what I'm saying half the time. I could have a full-blown conversation with you when I'm tired. I will not remember it tomorrow because when I'm tired, I'm gone. I'm so zoned out. So like, that does affect your decision making. So that's very, very interesting. But let us go to Newcastle because that's who we're talking about today. I have seen Gary is in the house. So we have Shem and Gary here this evening. Lovely, lovely. That's what we like. What else I was saying? And yeah, I see the chat there, I'm having a bit of a chat. There's no obvious replacement for Eddie Howe, which again points towards keeping him at least unless somebody unbelievable becomes available. And yeah, having a little talk about the draw. So that's it. But let us go to Newcastle. Honourable mention to my team, Man United, who have actually unbelievably only had 616 days lost from injuries. Considering we have had Matthias de Ligt and Mason Mount out for basically the entire season, that must be the whole injury. Other than that, we must have had very little injuries, which is really incredible when you think of it. Imagine if Luke Shaw was his normal self this season, that number might have doubled. But essentially, we've missed 616 days through injury, and nearly all of that has to be de Ligt and Mount. So something is suddenly going right. And when I talk obviously about Amorim, I talk about on the pitch it wasn't good enough, off the pitch it was. So off the pitch, whatever he was doing, and obviously we're only playing one game a week, so that does help as well. But I mean, I would be interested to see what this was last season because I can't imagine it was this low. So, going to Newcastle, they're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Newcastle are number 6 on this list, okay? They have lost 1,014 days through injury. Now, obviously that's an enormous amount of time. It's also really important to mention they were really key injuries to really key players. So, for example, one of those was Yoane Wissa, their brand new striker that they brought in to replace world-class Alexander Isak. I mean, it was we're going to talk about the Isak situation because it feeds into, obviously, this season and what Eddie Howe was facing. But Yoane Wissa, their new key signing striker, to be out injured for so long as he was, is huge. When we know Dan Burn was out, and Dan Burn is such a key piece for them. He's such a key leader on the pitch. He's so important to the team. When we know he was out with a punctured lung, it was a key injury. So it's not only the amount of time they lost, but it's who they lost for that period, which is crazy. So massive there. But if we go down to this table, this chart shows each team's count of injury incidents this season. A player can appear more than once if they sustain separate injuries. So the top one showed the total number of days missed per injury. This one shows the total number of injuries. But I'm going to use Arsenal as an example here, okay? So Arsenal are top of this league. Arsenal have had the most injuries in the Premier League. Excuse me a minute. There we are, now I can talk again. Arsenal have had the most total number of injuries in the Premier League this season. They have had 56 separate injuries this season at Arsenal, okay? But if we go up to this one, they're halfway down the list. They've only missed, they've missed 931 days. So what that tells us is, while they're getting more injuries than anybody else, the injuries are not as severe and their players are recovering much quicker. So essentially, where Spurs, if we go to Spurs now, who are quite a bit down, Spurs have had much less injuries. They've only had 44 injuries this season, okay? But they've missed so many days. So what that tells us is they're having more serious injuries. So while Arsenal players might be getting loads of knocks, loads of minor niggly things that they recover from quickly, when Spurs are losing players, they're losing players for long periods due to serious injuries, which obviously then have more recovery time, and they've more time when you do get back to fitness to slot back into the team. So going back to Newcastle, they've lost a lot of days, but also they have had 49 injuries. So Newcastle are quite near the top of the first table for the amount of days they've lost. They're also second in this table for the most amount of injuries. So they've had more players injured, more different players injured, more different injuries, and longer. So it means they're having more players with more injuries that are more serious, which obviously has a knock-on effect when we already know they have one of the highest average ages of any squad in the Premier League. So they're playing more matches than anybody else. They have one of the oldest squads in the Premier League. Add to that, these players, these old players that are playing more matches than anybody else, are getting more injuries than other people, which therefore obviously means more recovery time because they're a little bit older, and also means even when they're technically recovered and available to be picked again, they still have to ease themselves back in, because if it's anything more than a knock or a niggle, it can take a match or two to get back up to speed. So when you take all of the pieces of information and just literally put them together, it makes it very clear why Newcastle may not be performing that well this season. Now, added to that, we do obviously then have to talk about the fact that they lost Alexander Isak. So Alexander Isak, the saga that was Alexander Isak in the summer. So not only was it dragged on, played out in public, the whole furore, not knowing. So during the summer, Alexander Isak left training and then said he couldn't travel with the squad to train with Newcastle in pre-season because he was injured, and then went abroad and did his own separate solo training, which Eddie Howe didn't know about until he saw it on social media. So when you see things like that, not only did they lose a world-class, fantastic striker who they had built their team around more or less, they lost him in such a horrible way, in such a chaotic way, which clearly will have impacted not only the setup of the team, but also the mentality of the players still in the dressing room, because a lot of them are obviously friends with him and maybe wouldn't have agreed with what was happening. So, you have to factor, we talk, and Jenny obviously is here with us, we hear often that Liverpool talk about the players they lost. Do you know, when Trent was practicing Spanish in the background, and obviously the sad loss of Jota, Salah now, who seems to be coming to the end. Do you know, we hear that, but we don't really talk about it with Newcastle. The impact of losing a player like that is enormous. So not only have you lost basically your key scorer, the guy when you're in a crisis you go to, but then everybody else is hurting themselves. The guy that was supposed to replace him never got on the pitch for the first 3 months. And you're looking at it going, does it really matter if you're Eddie Howe or Pep Guardiola or Sir Alex Ferguson or anybody else? If you're not Harry Houdini, you're not going to be able to do anything with no players and your main striker gone after leaving a trail of chaos in his wake. So you do have to think, okay, maybe, and I'm just throwing it out there, it's possible that this season being a bit underwhelming isn't entirely Eddie Howe's fault. What I will say is he can't escape all blame, because when you're playing Voltemada as a defensive midfielder, deeper than half the other players on the pitch, when the man single-handedly kept you afloat while Johan Wissa was out injured, I think that's silly. And I think there's so much of it is outside Eddie Howe's control. There's so much that he has had to deal with, off the pitch and on the pitch. And we know that he can get through adversity because he did it. He did it at Bournemouth and he did it when he got to Newcastle. So we know he can get through adversity. There's no obvious replacement that is absolutely categorically better than him. So I don't think you can blame him for this season. And at the minute, I have to say, I wouldn't get rid of him. And I would have before, because I've had this conversation, you guys have seen it. I've had this conversation live with Ash a number of times. But I hadn't done my research. Now I've done my research. I've looked into it. I've educated myself. I've filled in some of the gaps on my knowledge because nobody knows everything. I'm just a fan. I don't know everything. So I went and I looked. Information is free. Knowing what I know now, having looked at all the information I've looked at, I wouldn't want him sacked if I was a Newcastle fan. However, that doesn't mean that you would not give him any criticism. So, and I think I find this very much, certainly in the United fan base, we're very polarising people. But you can like Eddie Howe. You can think it's not all his fault. You can want to keep him. However, you can still think he's doing things wrong. So, I can think Eddie Howe made a mess by playing Nick Voltemada where he did. I can think Eddie Howe is not doing good enough to help Nick Voltemada, who has clearly hit a mental block. I can think that and still not think he should be sacked. Do you know what I mean? But I've gone on a right out rant there, people. West Ham have gone 1-0 up against Brentford. I have probably put the markers on Brentford after saying I think they're going to win. So apologies to Brentford. That's probably my fault. But do we know? And it was Jared Bowen who got the goal for West Ham. So Danny Dyer will be pleased. But let me get through the last of your comments and we will finish up here and go and watch what promises to be a very good game, which thankfully already has a goal. iNotes, obviously. I see iNotes and I see laughing faces. So I know for a fact that there's going to be something in here. So let me start with Dave Boy. I'll ease the chat in. Dave Boy says, I think everyone should be sad for Isak, but feel good for Newcastle's bank balance. I mean, that's fair. Flossie follows that up with, the man is a weasel. Love it. Dichotomy. iNote says, free Isak, we've got our feet up. Is the league over? Are we going to win the quadruple? That sounds like somebody I know that was on a live stream with his feet up. Dave Boy says, Newcastle pulled the Scousers' pants down and more than spanked them. He has a bad injury record. That he does. He has a terrible injury record. Jenny says, to be honest, I know this is not a popular, I know this is not a popular thing to say in the Liverpool world, but I think the loss of Jota was a bigger deal than any of us can imagine. And I think I did a video on this near the very start of the season, actually. And I think everybody reacts differently to grief. Everybody reacts differently to loss. And while it is their job to go and play football, we've said it a number of times in this stream, we are all only human and we are impacted and it's their real life. So not only have they lost a friend, many of them, but they now have to daily visit the place that reminds them of him the most, because every day they're there, they're going to remember him. They're going to remember all the times they had there together. So I think 100% it massively will have impacted them. And I think anybody who signed and came into that atmosphere, it has to be an unusual atmosphere to enter as well. So of course it's going to affect people, not only that were there, but people coming into it. So 100% I think it impacts. Let me see. Flossie is agreeing with that as well. What else? Guess is saying, I hope everyone has hit the like and subscribe by now. And Nathan is here just in time for us to end the stream, but he has in fact noticed a slight touch of the rebrand. So since we have so many teacups in the house right now, let me see. What have we got? It was 200 and we have 442 teacups. So I thought, you know what? That deserves an updated profile picture, and I have updated the banner as well, but the best view of it is on the TV. So if you can put it on your TV, you'll see the whole banner. On any other device, you'll see like a part of it. But yeah, I had a little bit of fun today. Quite enjoy it. Thank you for noticing, Nathan. I do appreciate it. But Gary will not be here tomorrow watching the football. You will be back on Wednesday, and I look forward to seeing you then. I, however, will be back tomorrow, but we do, of course, have football tomorrow, which means I will likely be back at the earlier time of 7 o'clock again. So I will see you guys tomorrow, 7 p.m. Smash a like if you haven't done so already. I'm ending the poll because I always forget. And has Howe taken Newcastle as far as he can? 68% of you said seems like it. So I tried to stick up for Eddie Howe. I couldn't do it. Have a good evening, folks. Enjoy the rest of the match, and I will talk to you all tomorrow evening. Thank you very much for being here, as always.